And it's 7 on the dot. Our audience is in the house. So, welcoming all the audience here, welcoming you, Seetha. Uh,
Thank you.
Thank you for joining this conversation and welcome to the first wisdom talk of the year, actually. Uh,
Oh,
so glad to be starting that. So glad to be starting that with you. Uh, we'll
thank you.
introduce you in the bio, but I just want to introduce you from a personal angle of being somebody who's inspired me in a lot of ways, particularly in terms of caring for nature, in terms of being an entrepreneur also. And really just want to acknowledge that you stood by our work through and through. So just want to acknowledge that. So it's a joy to have you on the other side of this as well, Sita. Thanks for accepting the invitation.
Thank you so much. I really feel or joining in with you has been very, very little. And we on our side have really been amazed at the work you all are doing, because that's the kind of work I feel is needed a lot more with a whole lot of youngsters.
True.
It's,
So we'll come to these questions also, but our tradition, Sita, is to start with this question: what is wisdom according to you? And I want to locate it also in the context of today's conversation, which is nature. And on WhatsApp, your status is "We are Gaia." Like on WhatsApp, that's what your status says, that we are the planet. So curious from that perspective, how do you look at wisdom? What is wisdom?
okay. See, we are Gaia is not so much that we are the planet, but but it's more of we are all, little, uh, uh, what do you call it, little offerings or little aspects of Gaia, however tiny we are. But yet, Gaia it's only because of Gaia that we are there. So
Yeah.
it's something like that. Not so much that we are the planet. Um, Regarding your question about wisdom, uh, for me, wisdom is very closely tied with the well-being, and not just well-being as in the moment well-being or feeling good or something, but really long-term well-being. So the more we are able to look at long-term well-being in the sense of seeing the whole picture, and seeing the way life is all about processes, and somehow our mind, brain, we end up right from probably to do with schooling, or maybe I wonder whether our eyesight as one of the senses is more powerful than other senses in some ways. I may be wrong. I have no research data to prove it. But we see so many things around, and we have gotten into so much of object-oriented thinking. It's all objects we see and objects we want to possess, or we make relationships also sometimes objects, and often, and so on. And processes are more hidden, and so to be able to see there is this famous Thich Nhat Hanh saying that when you see a paper, do you see a cloud? It is that kind of thinking that is seeing processes. And so in that sense, well-being in the process sense, as well as in seeing the whole picture sense. Not so much short-term well-being, which is, we may call pleasure, not that I'm, against pleasure, but it seems like pleasure that doesn't harm the long-term well-being is good. So traditionally, we didn't really have to worry so much about it, because technology wasn't such that it created problems with long-term well-being. today, as we all know, technology is a big part of, whether it is mining oil or whatever you call it, the technology is a big part of coming in the way of long-term well-being. Whereas traditionally, without that, people were, quite happy with whatever there was in the world in their own ways. Not that there was no pain, no problems. But today, it seems like, and therefore, the nature of pleasure, the nature of long term well being seem to be, not so endangered as it is today. Whereas today, you find so much more of the, whether it is junk food and problems for the body, or whether it is, short term consumerism, short term well being seeking consumerism, which is creating so much of climate change or anything else. There's too much on looking for pleasure without looking at long term well being. So there's a lot of confusion in some of these words in people's minds, I think, or maybe a lot of maybe our mind is made such in such a way that we are only looking at something near us, so not really looking at something long distance. I mean, a long time away, a long distance away. So struggling for that seems to be a bit of wisdom for me. One part of it, let me say.
I think I'm going to build on that, Seetha. I think you touched some very interesting aspects. One is the process piece, and process-based work is also something that happens at Bhumi, where look at human processes. And you also spoke about what is visible and objects and short term vis-a-vis the longer term. So the question that was coming to me was what is not fully visible that we as a collective of human beings particularly are not seeing in our ways, in our worldviews. Just curious about what do you see, what would you like to illuminate that is not as visible? Is there anything that comes to your mind from that sense of, yeah, what do you see is not visible to most people or not as obvious?
Well, there are so many things, I guess. Uh, I don't know. There are a huge number of things which all of us are not able to see. And if you see, even if I look back at my life, there were many things I could not see 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. It's a constant process of learning. But I think it's really not seeing, which I think is a big issue, but something to do with the way we live our lives from early childhood, which programs our subconscious minds and which we are almost helpless against, Like, just take this thing of living in cities. I think most governments today want to push, increased urban population to probably 80% or more and reduce the rural population and so on. But living in cities, living surrounded by, walls, things, and man-made realities largely. And it's not that nature's realities are not visible. Our own body is a nature's, is nature, is Gaia. Our own body is also aspect of nature. But our minds are so dazzled by the things around in cities and so on. And that's what shapes our subconscious minds. And I think neuroscientists today say that 95 to 99% of our behavior is determined by our subconscious minds. And I remember saying this to, audience of youngsters and here, there. And very often this question comes up, hey, I don't think so. I don't think there are so many things we consciously decide and do. It's not so. It's not so. But if you really look at the very big things in life, so invariably I bring this. how many of you would like to, those of you, all the my audience is normally from the cities, would like to live in a village? Hardly anyone. And
Mm-hmm.
that's because our subconscious mind has formed our comfort zones, our what we like, what we can even imagine, for ourselves as a
Mm-hmm.
place to, as a context for our lives, is only city. So if you look at it, the largest part of our life where we live is determined by our subconscious minds.
Mm-hmm.
Now we are unable to see that. And if you ask me, looking at that actually helped me when, those earlier days when you see, oh my God, this corporate world, this, 1% at the top trying to rule the world. And, all that makes you blood boil at, what's happening to the world. I think kind of looking into the way nature has constructed our minds, our subconscious minds, has a big part to play in in the suicidal path of humankind today.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
You share a
most of us
little more
feel,
about that? Yeah.
yeah. So we are unable to, you know, go beyond what our subconscious minds want for us. So
Mm-hmm.
and therefore, in common parlance, we can call it addictions. So we are addicted to so many things. Addiction is not only to alcohol or drugs, no? It's
Mm-hmm.
addictions to living in a city, addiction to a monthly salary, addiction to white rice, addiction to so many different things, the kind of
Yes,
food we
yes.
eat. I mean, subconscious minds make us addicted. Maybe it is so with all animals. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've heard that even snakes, when you catch them and put them into the forest or something far away, they are very unhappy and they try to come back, and sometimes they die there because they're not used to the new environment, even if
Mm-hmm.
that is a more forest-like environment. So I don't know. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
into biology
Mm-hmm.
and zoology, but
Yeah.
somewhere I've heard this. So
Mm.
maybe all animals have this addictive nature, except that when they are already living in the wild, already connected with their habitat, they don't have the problem of human beings who have created a huge man-made world. No other
Mm-hmm.
creature has created a world which seems bigger in our minds, in the animals' minds or anybody's minds, than the human beings. So the human web of life, the human man-made web, is so complex and so captivating, so
Mm-hmm.
trapping. I would imagine that. I don't even know whether seeing that means we can release ourselves from that.
Mm-hmm.
But well, I mean, we are we are caught in such a system. We can only
Mm-hmm.
look at it and say, okay, I'll do this little bit. God knows what
Yes.
will come of it.
True, true. And we are deep into it, maybe.
Yeah.
So, Sita, let me move from there because I think you've articulated a bit of the challenge that we are in. And since the talk also we said was around nature's principles and looking at nature's principles in building organizations. So, wanted to move into nature and what can we learn then from the healthy aspects of nature? In your own journey, what have been those lessons? How have you tried to take some of those lessons and apply them into your work?
You said LD aspects of nature or healthy?
Healthy, healthy, the positive, the
Healthy
as
aspects
yeah,
of
yeah,
nature.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I was a little puzzled when you're reading your, line about um, how can we learn from nature's principles to build organizations, right? Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know, you know, where the question comes from, as in, I don't think, knowing all of you, that it is coming from a place of, some standard good models or something like that,
Mm, mm,
because I feel that one of the first lessons of nature to learn is that in nature, everything co-evolves with its habitat,
mm, mm, mm,
you know. So just learning from models has been a huge problem, I think, for human beings.
mm, mm,
You
mm,
know? So it's not that learning from anything is a problem, but I need to adapt it to my environment,
mm,
you know.
mm,
And it is so even in very, very direct, simple ways. Like, I'll give you an example, what made us think, because I come from a school situation also. Maria Montessori did a lot of studies, and she was an amazing researcher of children, working with children, observing children. And she made a set of equipment, which she would be very particular that it should be precise, the length of it, and it should be 1 meter and 1 inch, and so on and so forth. Maybe she was idiot proofing it because she wanted, like the typical West, take it to the third world, and third world will mess it up. So let us idiot proof it or something. But you find all over India, it's become a big business to have those precise things. And I think I was really charmed when I found one teacher. You might know her, Amukta Mahapatra. And, she was working in a village,
mm,
So instead of that stick of a particular kind of a particular size, she just took stick from a branch, So many sticks were used to count. As simple as that. In nursery, what do? You learn these kind of things too, And she just took sticks, she just took stones, and did the same things that Maria Montessori did. To me, that is co-evolving with the
the habitat.
local
Yeah.
habitat, and not to get so caught up with it's not that we shouldn't learn from the West or the East or anywhere else, but I need to see what sense it makes for me. And is it really needed? Do I need to buy Montessori equipment worth, those days it used to be a couple of lakhs, today I don't know how much. And is it needed for a village school?
Mm,
And there
mm,
were some who were very well-meaning and still trying, thinking bringing that equipment there to a school will do wonders.
mm, mm,
I
mm,
don't
mm,
know whether that will do wonders, or just living in a particular environment, doing certain kind of work, acquiring certain habits. For instance, a habit of doing physical work, you know.
mm, mm,
In cities, you do so little physical work, and mental work is rewarded much more. Now, these
mm,
are
mm,
much more dangerous than, using a stick instead of that perfect Montessori equipment,
mm, 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 mm,
you
mm,
know. So, uh, I mean, this is what I mean, that co-evolving
mm, mm,
the habitat is a big principle of nature. So whatever we do, whatever we learn, we need to see how it, and it's not always easy, not always possible. Because, for instance, we are living in I'll talk more about schools because other organizations I've seen, but I'm more familiar with what happens in the school. So if you look at how people design a school, like you take ICSE, it came originally from the Cambridge schools and so on, and it's continued like that well after independence, whatever, 75, 80 years, whatever. And therefore, in today's situation, practically, if you want to do a school, you have to follow one of these boards.
mm,
And
mm,
if you do that, then automatically you cannot co-evolve with the environment in a significant way.
mm,
But
mm,
you can still co-evolve in some ways,
mm, mm, mm,
So it is to not to, like it is said, like how today, in the way the system has been so designed, so monolithic, so much of a monoculture.
mm,
What we need to do is still grow like grass in the cracks in the concrete,
mm, 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 mm,
So we still can do many things, even though it is very tough to follow nature's principles entirely,
mm,
even
mm,
in this simple, or rather, it's not so simple, it is complex.
mm,
Co-evolve with what is needed for that
that
environment,
context and that
that
environment.
context. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And there are so many more aspects to nature. I don't know what is it that you would like to look at.
There were several things. I mean, in terms of the way you go about doing things, also somehow the way I experience it is of a much lesser interventionist way, but allowing things to happen perhaps, and letting people also take roles which are innately, naturally kind of good to the good with them, their own gifts, and questions around competition, questions around what you said about the dangers of mental work being prioritized over physical work, and we see that in organizations as well. So it's an open question, but yeah, any of these which come to your mind also, because for an organization to survive, to sustain, also some of those are realities. So how? So just building on where you started, which is co-evolving, I guess. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So you mentioned things like competition and what else? I mean, um, I think also, you mentioned this thing of being not intervening. What do you call it?
Allowing.
In
Interfering.
too many places, letting. That's okay. If I take that first, it is really not a matter of not intervening, but intervening in significant areas.
Mm, mm,
No? And allowing people to, take things forward. If you really look at it, it is something like fractals in nature,
mhm,
right? So fractals, I mean, just to share what it is with others, nature repeats patterns. And like if you take certain trees, it'll branch into three, and that branch will branch into another three smaller branches, and that will branch into another three. And it's like really, that's what is called fractals. And I think there is such a thing as cultural fractals.
mhm,
So if you take, we try to, my struggle right through has been intervening at the co-holding philosophy level,
mhm,
right? So when groups of people work very hard to thresh out, to talk, to look at what each one thinks of as philosophical issues of the institution, then the cultural fractals happen.
mm,
In a
mm,
way, some people say it's dangerous. There is too much of a group think. Everybody thinks the same way or whatever. And then, different people do different things, but with the same philosophy in mind.
mm, mm, mm,
You
mm,
know, like for instance, in Prakriya, let's say we talk about respecting nature, learning from nature, and so on. It's called a Green Wisdom School. If we deal with it, and actually that's not a very very personalized philosophy. It's a more universal one because we all are part of the universe, part of the earth. So there are many who um, respond to it. It's just been buried in them because of the kind of schooling, the kind of
mm, mm,
economic system we live in, the kind of families they brought up. They might have put it on the back burner or even buried it totally. But
mm,
it is something that blooms and flowers and comes out if the space is there, that this
mm,
philosophy is valued. you
mm,
know
mm,
and
mm.
then there are some who own it up a lot more, some who don't, and people come alive with that kind of philosophical thinking. And then what each one doesn't have to be micromanaged or over supervised.
Mm, mm, mm,
you
mm,
know so I would say that I've always believed in intervening at the philosophy and principles level, and
mm,
next at the setting in place the processes and practices.
mm, mm, mm,
Philosophy, uh, principles, we call them first principles. So I've been part and parcel of almost all of these aspects.
mm, 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 mm,
Working with the philosophy, working with principles, working with processes
mm,
and
mm,
practices. So, but I don't need to be with every event organized, every
mm, mm,
decision
mm,
taken, every whatever, you know. So
mm,
I
mm,
would say it is in a way learning from nature of trying to be, so what is the DNA, or what is the, the genetic coding in a plant that makes it repeat itself, you
mm,
know.
mm, mm,
I
mm,
think for the human mind, it possibly one thing is philosophy or belief systems, which is part of
which
philosophy.
replicate, right?
Yeah. If you look back, in today, money and business and everything has become religion. Once upon a time, the bigger religion, not that it's totally dead today, was God and certain beliefs, and maybe there was the priests or the kings or whatever else. And that belief system, created its own fractals,
Mm,
cultural
mm.
fractals. So many people continuing that way of thinking
Yes,
over
yes.
thousands of
Over
years.
thousands of years. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the Vedic wedding designed for 4 or 5,000 years ago is still being in practice in some form.
Yes, yes,
You know?
yes,
So
yes.
many things get handed down like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
without anybody who started it supervising, it just touched that nerve about belief in something much larger than yourself, the
Mm,
Vedic
mm.
beliefs, you know. Now, it may not at all be followed by the actual person today who's conducting such a wedding or whatever, but there's some remnants of it continue.
Yes, yes, yes. They do. They do.
So I think that is a challenge for people who want to learn from nature and work, how to create these kind of cultural fractals in an
Mm,
institution.
mm,
But
mm,
I
mm.
must say it's very hard, as in it takes time. You sometimes feel like just giving it all up and going to the Himalayas. But the beauty of it is there are a lot of people who join in.
Mm, mm,
And when
mm.
you want to give up, they're telling me, hey, Sita, come on, this good thing is happening, that good thing is happening. What is wrong with you? Etc., etc. And
Mm,
they
mm,
will bail me out. And in
mm.
times when I lose spirit about after 20 years, this is all we've done,
Mm, mm,
So,
mm, mm.
so, but it's okay. It's
Yeah, yeah.
another way to pass the time of day.
Yeah. I'm going to just unpack this a little more, Sita, which is like what you were saying, the philosophy, the processes, the practices, and creating a shared understanding so that it may replicate as a fractal. And I'm curious, when this happens, is this through dialogue with each other, or is it you introducing some of these principles? Are these discovered? How does one build that field of energy, that field of shared philosophy? What has been your journey on doing that?
Uh, well, I don't know whether this word macro ego is commonly used or not. But
Macro ego. Okay,
one of
interesting.
my gurus, Pulin, you know him,
Hmm, hmm,
has used it like, being a macro ego of a program, where let's say 100, people are there. Somebody has to hold that whole, it's not holding in actual work done here and there. But somewhere in your mind, you are uh, holding the well-being of the whole ecosystem. You're holding the willingness to offer your being to any part of the system, to the whole system. I
hmm,
think you'll
hmm,
understand it very well, because I feel you, in a sense, have been a macro ego for Blue Ribbon.
hmm, hmm, hmm,
Not that you have done every single thing, but
hmm,
you have influenced it in a significant way. Not that, I mean, again, not doing everything. So in a way,
hmm,
you seem to be doing something similar,
hmm, 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 hmm.
and so I think that's it helps if somebody is a macro ego of the system.
Okay, okay.
I feel so, because without it, sometimes it takes a long time to mature, and for somebody else to become, the macro ego. It should happen ideally, And you said, is it through you bringing in? Yes, it is not only me, but sometimes other people in the group have brought in significant changes, suggested changes. And what was the other thing you said? Whether it evolves in a particular way or whatever it is. It's all of these things put together. It's not only me, although I would say I've kind of played the role of macro ego. And now when I say sabbatical, I'm saying I don't want to play that role anymore. But it's not, it's a little difficult to simply just say that and walk out. So maybe walking out is a good way. Then somebody else will have to fill in that location.
True. True. If that is possible, in fact. So, sorry, Seetha, you were saying something?
No, nothing. So actually, one shouldn't get caught up with permanence. In nature, nothing is permanent. I think one of the things that helped me to accept all this, the way so many hundreds of creatures are going extinct every day and such kind of information, is that apparently 99% of the life forms that have come into Earth have already gone extinct. This is some data from somebody, E.O. Wilson, or some of these people who have, on what basis they have projected this, I do not know. But a very, very large number of insects and animals and birds and everything have come and gone. So also, even an organization, it need not continue in exactly the same way. It's again co-evolving with the micro environment and the macro environment, both. Maybe the way we are going with the climate change and all that, maybe in another 30, 40, 50 years, everybody will be looking at, how do we align with nature? It's not so much in, and then we may have to look at something else. People who want to go away from the beaten path may have to look for something. Anyway, that is just by the way. So it's a little more complex than, just looking at an organization the way, for instance, corporate work is. Because there your goals are more clear and, even there is a lot of complexity, but it's a lot more monocultural. Whereas here, if you really want to be in touch with nature and let nature flow through you in working with another part of nature, which is a community, which you have to take it as it comes.
With all its diversity also, because again, when you use the word monoculture, I don't know if everybody else is clear on monoculture, but it'd be nice if you can share when you refer to monocultures, are those monocultures of the mind or being, like, what would you mean by monocultures?
Yeah, it is monocultures of the mind, but it's also becoming like monocultures. I think the word Vandana Shiva used it first, came from agriculture. Earlier there would be, let's say a farm had, say, 30 different kinds of things were grown there. Whereas now almost all the trees are cut and there is just huge areas of rice or sugarcane or something that's grown. That is monoculture. One kind, it's not a diverse agriculture, it is monoculture, Now, the same thing has happened to, for instance, education. I don't know for the life of me why, let's say, the whole of India or the whole of the world should learn, maths, language, history, geography, biology, same set of things, whether you're in a village or in a city or wherever, why do you have to learn that is monoculture? Learning the identical things. I think now the government is talking about, Gandhiji talked about it in his Nai Talim. He said, having local crafts, local wise people coming and involving themselves in education, and so on and so forth, and building local economies, So that's also an aspect of nature. Nature doesn't plan, like, even if you take, say, butterflies, Now, nature didn't have one monoculture of all the butterflies or even 5 different kinds of butterflies. We have hundreds of butterflies, you know. I'm sure each butterfly co-evolve with its habitat somewhere, you know. And even if that habitat is a particular tree, you know, like I heard from one of the naturalists who came to our school and documented all the butterflies and birds here, that there's a particular kind of butterfly. Sorry, I've forgotten its name. It has blue dots in it. He says certain butterflies will lay eggs only on certain trees, you know. So this particular butterfly lays eggs only on the cinnamon tree, the leaf or the bark or wherever, you know. So there's something must be there about the co-evolving of the cinnamon tree and the butterfly. You know, God knows what it is. That's the mystery of life.
Yes, that's the mystery of nature.
Yeah. And of course, there's one other level of mystery. When we came here to the school, there was it was all eucalyptus trees. Okay. Now, eucalyptus, of course, was another monoculture brought from Australia. And, it was just an imported model, like Montessori became an imported thing. And we had to cut them all off, and we decided to have as much variety as possible. And we have more than 108 species of trees now. So we have planted also a couple of cinnamon trees, you know. Now, when we came in, there were no butterflies at all, you know. Now we have 70, 80 species of butterflies.
Wow.
Okay. Now, how did this particular butterfly know there's a cinnamon tree out here? You know, from somewhere it's come.
Yes.
And nowhere in the surrounding is there any other butterfly. So if you look at it, you know, the complexity of how nature works is sort of beyond
our minds.
Probably the human beings in all our arrogance will never figure that out. How that particular butterfly figured out there is one cinnamon tree to lay eggs on in this place where it was not there before, and nor are there many such trees in the entire environment. Wow. So it's come flying in from somewhere. So if you look at it, the complexity, this is complexity. So complexity is another principle of nature that we need to you talked earlier about what do we need to know, or something like that. What do we need to see? We need to see complexity a lot more and appreciate that complexity, which will probably, give us a lot of joy and fun and probably look less at consumerism. If you look
at appreciating the beauty of complexity and the mystery of nature.
Yeah.
So 2 questions. That one got a heart from someone in the audience. 2 questions, Seetha, come to me. Let me start with a question around speed. When we have diversity and a non-monoculture, you have that diversity. Nature has its own rhythm, its own speeds, and then the mind wants to go at certain speeds also. In your journey, how have you negotiated that? How have you looked at speed of anything growing? You said it takes time also. Earlier you said that building that common field of shared philosophy takes time. And I'm curious about speed in terms of rushing things versus going with the flow. How do you look at speed? How do you look at the pace at which things happen? Isn't there a sense of urgency sometimes? Like, what's your relationship with speed?
Well, I also thought I was a bit of a speeded up person, and I deliberately slowed down over time. Speeded up in the sense, there are so many things happening in the context of an institution, and you want to respond to so many things, and you want things carried forward. How does one apply that philosophy there? We don't have all the answers when we start. So as things emerge, when we talked about complexity, there's also the emergence part. Things emerge in a complex situation. They're not all predetermined, or, it cannot be planned ahead. kind of thing.
Mm,
So, given that so many people come from the environment, which is totally a man-made web, and totally, what do you call it, with our subconscious mind programmed to look at something in a different way, it's difficult to, I mean, you feel if you want to respond to this need to kind of connect nature with what you're doing, you need to respond to so many things. And of course, people join in. Others are also doing the same thing. As I said, the fractals issue happens. But it's been, in that so much of responding to so many different things and wanting to do this, wanting to do a conference, wanting to bring out a magazine, then have some farming and children to go to farm. And, I have been biting off more than I could chew. But in all of that, I think it was not so much that one has to get to a particular goal. There was also a readiness in a particular way in the system to do the next thing. And things emerged which we felt we could go into, which I also felt, yes, I could invest time in. The speeded up thing, living in this kind of world, I mean, as I said, I don't think I would consider myself a non-speeded up person. I have been, and that has resulted in even illnesses, like diabetes for me, or vitiligo. These are things which come with high stress. But I've learned in the last 5 years, especially, to gradually slow down and say, let anything be. It's okay. I do my bit, and and now there are also many, many more people in the institution who have co-owned the institution, and they are doing. And then there is a time when one has to say, it's fine. It's going very well as everybody wants it. There's
just the way everybody collectively.
Everybody, yeah. It may not be exactly the way I want it all the time. But that has not been a great need for me. But it has been where it goes against the philosophy. It becomes a need for me. Where I see it happening.
Then you intervene, or then you.
I do intervene sometimes, but progressively less and less. Yeah.
We have a question from the audience. I'm going to take that up after this question. So Kaitzia and Diego from Mexico are listening in. But Seetha, before I go on to that question, when you say responding to emergence, then what roles do plans play then? Because there's an interplay of something you have planned and then something emerges, and then you're responding to that emergence. How does one resolve this paradox of I had planned this and this is what I have to execute, or this was my original goal, this is what we had set out to do, and then different things are happening that you're also responding to? Do the two seamlessly happen for you, or is it more that you tend to respond to emergence because it's a complex system? Just curious about emergence, planning. How do you look at that?
Yeah, see, in the kind of modern organizations we have, like you said, planning is inevitable. The moment, you have a fairly large, not a very small number, but not maybe a huge number. And that's another principle of nature, not to go into huge numbers, smaller communities of people working together makes more sense. So even in nature, I don't think certain communities, whether it's elephants, whether anything, there are limits to the communities or herds of animals, And similarly, in schools also, for instance, it is important that, not that it's important, we have seen to it that the numbers are not too huge, kind of a thing. And then if you look at plans, as I said, because we have to merge the man-made world's requirements and nature's requirements together, we have to merge the ICSE syllabus requirements and our philosophy of what we believe, how we believe children. And often I'm tearing my head thinking we are going much more the mainstream way than we should, because it's like a pull and push all the time.
Sure.
So like nature, all that we can do for our well-being is to self-regulate. So we have told our parents in the beginning, look, we are not going to push for the highest marks and things like that. And yes, children will study, children need to be prepared for the current technological world also. So they will do all these things, and being an ICSE school, that's our commitment. But our commitment is not to push the child against his or her ability, or not to ruin the spirit of the child in the name of making her or him get marks, blah blah, all those kind of things.
Yes.
But yet, as parents come into a higher class, the frenzy starts developing. And in fact, we are right now, in the last 1.5 years, making use of the COVID times when things are being done differently here. We've been working on something we have called a Prakriya renewal program, re-looking at everything, like literally. We've roped in whom we are calling the elders of Prakriya, some of the senior teachers, some of them who have left but who are very strongly connected to Prakriya. All of us together have been the facilitators, and interviewing every single person, whether there is a driver, whether it's also all the teachers, all the other assistants, admin, everybody, and trying to figure out what they feel and what we should be doing, and so on. In organizations, this is also a little bit of learning from corporate world. Like, I think it's called OD, organizational development work. But we have been doing it in our own way. So in that process, we learn, we do try to, involve so many people to relook at the plans and the emergence, actually.
So involving a lot of people and then negotiating the goals.
Right. And in that, you get to see all sorts of issues, and primarily people bring up their emotional residues also. I'm not happy with this, I'm not happy with that, and why can't I have the freedom to do this, and so on and so forth. There's all of that is taken into account. And then looking at it, it looks like we were going more mainstream, than planned. Our plan was not to be this mainstream, but so many people are at work, so many people's subconscious minds have been formed by their schooling years, their idea of what, and the parents' demands maybe, and the children's own unconscious demands from the peer pressure. So if it's going more the mainstream, we try to sit and work it out. And we are changing the plans to be able to tell the parents, this is again, come back and recalibrate. This is what we are planning to do, and this is emerged, but this is what we plan to do. And whatever we do, I think the ability to do it comes, at least for me personally, from one of the Bhagavad Gita tenets, act from your convictions and pay the price. If you're unwilling to pay the price, you have to suffer the the incongruence within yourself of doing things you don't believe in. That becomes a price to pay. So if I really care for my well-being and the well-being of all of us here in this system who also think the same, we have to get together and say, no, somehow this has happened, this has emerged. But let us recalibrate and be willing to pay the price. And in a school situation, paying the price may be those parents who are very frenzied about the marks, they leave the school. We should say, normally most people are unwilling to pay the economic price.
Of standing by their convictions and
we too have gone that way without realizing it. No, what do we do to see that children don't go from here? I know we do it, and then that becomes a little excessive. No,
Mm,
so
mm.
that's why I'm saying that in nature, a major principle of nature is self-regulation. Nature is always self-regulating, right?
Right,
Like
right.
you take our bodies also, how we
Yes.
self-regulate. We feel very warm, the body puts out more sweat to cool the body.
Mm,
If we
mm.
are feeling cold, the body shivers to bring warmth to the body.
Yes.
So it's like a thermostat. So
Mm,
we need to also be the leaders of the school need to be like thermostats. To when they
mm.
see something excessive happening, which is not,
It
I think you have
self-regulate.
to do
Nice.
something else to, like
Regulate
the
it.
body sends out sweat, you do
Yes,
something
yes,
else to bring it
yes.
back to.
Beautiful. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
So
lovely, Sita.
self-regulation is the
Yes,
name
is
of the
another
game.
principle.
There's no
Yeah.
arriving. There is only
There's
self-regulation.
constant self-regulation. There is never
Yeah.
a destination. Thank you. That was
Thank,
really beautiful.
thank you. You made me articulate this. The plan and the emergence. I never looked at it that way, but
But
that's a
yes,
nice way.
self-regulation is beautiful. So this is coming from a listener in Mexico. Diego is here and Kedzia is here. They're saying thank you. So firstly, they're saying thank you for the conversation. We are listening from Mexico. Sita, I was very interested in the idea of planting a big variety of trees that will attract diversity of butterflies. If we take that as a metaphor, how is it reflected in building your organization? What would be the trees? What would be the butterflies? So
Mhm.
if you take the trees and the butterflies as a metaphor in your organization, what would the equivalent of diverse trees be like? What would the butterflies that come on their own be in the organization? I think that's the question. Is it a metaphor that we can take? And if it is, then yeah, what would be the trees? What would be the butterflies?
See, I'm not very clear about the question, but looking at this, we really did not plant trees saying different trees will attract different butterflies. You know, there are some butterflies which may go to many trees. I mean, we didn't really think about it. We later discovered this one
Hmm,
particular
hmm,
butterfly
hmm,
and one particular tree. But all the trees were simply planted for the joy of seeing diversity. The reason for planting the tree was children should learn from experience, experience of different kinds of trees. What we can, we do. We are unable to be in a forest, we are in a city, you know, and there is that much land. So we want to plant different kinds of trees. That was the reason, not really to attract so many butterflies. And I think it's a terrible thing that children only learn from books. You
hmm,
know, when you can easily go see a plant seeds, see them grow, do things. Instead, you have a diagram, in a page, and that's
hmm,
what you
hmm.
learn. And I may be digressing, but I'm suddenly remembering a very interesting story that a friend told me long back. Uh, he used to work with fishermen's children, and city children. I mean, not he used to work, he did some work, with two groups of children and just various activities. And one of them was playing with clay, you
Hmm,
know.
hmm,
And he said they noticed something very strange, that the city children generally would make a flat, a flat chapati like thing, flat thing
hmm,
with
hmm,
clay and
hmm,
then draw on it.
hmm,
Whereas the village children, the fishermen's children, would very easily do three-dimensional things.
hmm, hmm,
So the metaphor to draw from there is, in the kind of education we have, we are knocking off a dimension.
hmm. A whole dimension. Hmm, hmm,
So in that sense, the planting of trees and trying to have more live conversations, having more real life projects, closer relationships between teachers and children. In all this, the whole thing is to not knock off that dimension,
hmm,
that
hmm,
additional dimension of, when too much of uniformity is there.
hmm,
Children
hmm,
wear uniforms in school.
hmm,
Everything
hmm,
is uniform. The test you do is the same. The books you learn is the same. And,
hmm, hmm,
and so on and so forth. So that really knocks off something very subtly, very unconsciously, you
hmm,
know.
hmm.
So the idea of the trees is not really just to attract so many butterflies, but to
Mm-hmm.
provide
Provide the diverse.
a context which is reasonably complex for children.
Mm-hmm. So that
You
it
know,
almost is like the real world, the
the
complexity and
world of nature, the
world
bringing
of
in the
nature.
world of nature to
Yeah,
see every day, and not like seeing it in books,
right, right, true.
nor in a row of avenue trees.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. So last question, Sita, I think, and I'm going to link this to Sunil's question also. This is about the future because future is a topic of interest, and there was a time also when you were thinking a lot about future studies as a syllabus conversation. And so, looking into the future, any wishes that come to your mind? And Sunil is saying, how long will it take? But I think that you already answered that it's a dynamic balance, it's a journey. But curious about the future. Any wishes, any thoughts about the future? Any pointers for the future for the rest of us? How do we walk into a future that is more natural, that is more honoring of what we have received?
Well, I can't say that I have, yeah, the wish is like at least all schools would become, more ecologically wise, to live out that ecological wisdom. But I know that's easier said than done, you know. So, in that sense, I really, I'm not sure. That's just a wish. To look at it realistically, maybe it takes time, and oftentimes we see that it's only calamities that wake up people. So maybe it'll take calamities, it'll take a lot of people working in a lot of corners, you know. And I really love this line by, I think it was Paul Hawken in Blessed Unrest.
Mhm.
He talks about, like, um, just as white blood corpuscles come up in the body to fight any bacteria, whatever, any illness, similarly, what's happening to the earth, there are millions of people,
Mm,
who are
mm,
coming up spontaneously. I think he calls it the most, it's not an organized movement, but it's a spontaneous movement.
mm,
So many
mm.
people doing so many things we haven't even heard of, which in some way people are trying to set the balance right in terms of
Yes.
connecting with nature, reducing the, what do you call it, the carbon emissions, or educating people, multiple things. In fact, he's documented, I think, over 1 million organizations and people doing
Mm,
things. So he says, like,
yes.
we all can only be like white blood corpuscles unto Gaia, unto Earth.
Mm,
You know,
mm, mm,
so that's what I think should keep us going,
mm.
because we may not be able to wave that magic wand. But let me be humble enough to say that if I need to be that white blood corpuscles, I need to be. It's like Gandhiji's statement. Whatever you do may never be significant, but it's
Mm.
important that you do it.
Yes. Yes.
I really love that line. I
Yes.
think it bailed me out of despair sometimes.
Yes. It's a beautiful line, and it's also a beautiful note to pause this conversation. We are at the hour now. And
Yes.
this has been a lovely conversation, Sita. I think in this conversation itself, we unearthed so many of these principles that we were looking at, everything from self-regulation to co-evolving with habitat to the fractal nature. So loved so many of these ideas all coming together. Thank you so much for this conversation. I'm sure all in the audience also enjoyed it. We have put in details of Bhumi College, which does amazing work, and in the chat box. And all details are available. Please do connect to this ecosystem. It's a very, very beautiful ecosystem of all of us doing whatever we can. And yeah, and thank you, Sita. Thanks a lot. We'll share the
Thank
email
you.
IDs and other details. Yeah.
Thank you, Abhishek. Thanks to your whole team, and thanks to the audience.
Thanks a
So,
lot, everyone.
yeah, all the best to everybody. Yeah.